Darth Bane is the creator of the Rule of Two, everyone knows that, but who was he before this rule was created, and what deemed him to get there? He was born on Apatros, a world where everyone was struggling and stricken with poverty. Like most people on Apatros, Bane was a miner in one of the many Cortosis mines working for the Galactic Republic. One day, after getting into a fight with a Republic ensign, he kills the superior in an act of self-defense. Frightened to be arrested, he fled the planet to join the Sith, the only faction that was fighting against the Republic. There, he initially joined the Brotherhood of Darkness as a foot soldier before they recognized his immense potential in the Force. He then gets transferred to the Sith Academy on Korriban, and is then trained in the ways of the Sith. He stood at 2 meters height, was thus a rather tall human, and was very muscular and strong. He took great advantage of this, and often overwhelmed his peers with his sheer power, adapting a Form 5 gem so lightsaber style, which fit him well. Although he was very skilled and quickly rose through their ranks, he became an outcast among his other Sith peers, leaving Bane to spend a lot of time in the Sith archives. There, he learned of the ancient Sith and saw the flaws in the Brotherhood, where all of the Siths were equal except for one that wasn't the strongest, being their leader. He frowned as they weren't even taking the Darth title because Skira Khan, the current leader of the Brotherhood, feared that the Sith taking on this name could encourage infighting among them. Feeling this was wrong and disagreeing with the way the Academy was teaching them, as they even tried to limit his knowledge-seeking, he flew out into the galaxy to try and find out more about the ways of the ancient Sith and the dark side. He arrived on Lehon, and there he found the holocron of Darth Revan, which taught him everything he wanted to know about the Sith of old. From the teachings of Revan, he concluded that the Brotherhood, as it existed now, had to be destroyed should the Sith ever want to succeed over the Jedi. He felt disgusted that in the Brotherhood, weaker beings were treated as equals, and believed they were chains holding the strong back. With newfound purpose, he made his way to Ruusan, where the Brotherhood was having their biggest battle against the Jedi. Skir Khan believed that a win at Ruusan could tilt the entire war against the Republic in their favor. Thus, every single Dark Lord of the Sith, as well as Sith apprentice from the Academy, was present and summoned there. On Ruusan, he started challenging Khan, telling him that they were cowards. He then passed on the knowledge of Revan's holocron at the Thought Bomb to Khan, a ritual that, through the combined effort of several dark-side users, could create a blast that could absorb and kill any Force-sensitive being caught in its radius. Khan, believing it could win the battle on Ruusan, gathered the entire Brotherhood in underground caves to conduct the ritual. He had the Jedi follow them into the caves to destroy them once and for all. However, he was unaware that the Thought Bomb would kill them as well, a critical detail Bane didn't pass on to him. As they detonated the bomb, the entire Brotherhood was killed. Bane was the only survivor, as he stayed well away from the caves. Next order of things, Bane needed to find an apprentice. On Ruusan, he ran across a young girl named Zannah, who was strong in the Force and had been abandoned by the Jedi that brought her here. Seeing her as the ideal candidate to form to his will, Bane adopted her and took her in. To learn more about the Sith, he seeked out more ancient Sith holocrons, one such being the one of Freedon Nad. With the wisdom from Nad and Revan, he concluded a new way for the Sith forward. The Jedi thought the Sith to be extinct since the Battle of Ruusan. This should be used to their advantage. It was around 1000 BBY in which he introduced the Rule of Two to Zannah, where each generation of Sith should attempt to use secrecy and planning to slowly build a network to destabilize the Republic from within, and gain control over the galaxy through that. It required a lot of patience, but would mean ultimate victory eventually. He also recognized the issue that Khan Brotherhood had tried to rectify, that the Sith, in fighting, was a weakness. To circumvent that, he leaned on there only being 2 Sith, a master and an apprentice, one to hold the power, and another to crave it, searching for ways to eventually surpass their master and leaving the next generation even more powerful. The Rule of Two should also make sure that the Dark Lord of the Sith was the most powerful being, only to be challenged by his apprentice. The apprentice should challenge the master at the height of his power, proving that the apprentice had surpassed the master and proved that they were more fit to carry the grand plan forward. Only the strongest Sith should prevail to ensure that the most powerful Sith would one day rule the galaxy. as he reintroduced that the Siths would use the Darth name, the tradition that had existed during the Jedi Civil War and was used by Darth Revan. In the following decades, Bane kept accumulating wealth and knowledge, seeking out ancient Sith artifacts in the entire galaxy. He grew disappointed of Zannah, as she didn't seem to have the drive to actually challenge him in these years, concluding that she must be waiting for him to age and grow weaker until challenging him. Due to that, he started to look into ways to preserve his own life to live longer and bring up a new apprentice, seeing ways in doing so from Darth Andedis' holocron. Zannah, upon learning that her master seeked to live forever, saw the hypocrisy of it. It was a direct violation of the rule of two he had created. Only the strongest shall rule. With that, she seeked Bane out and finally challenged him to a duel. Bane managed to escape their first confrontation, though, and took on a new apprentice, an Itochi called Darth Cognus, whom he now saw as more fit than Zannah, whom he now deemed as unworthy of the Dark Lord of the Sith title. He introduced Cognus to the Sith doctrine and rule of two, but knew that eventually he had to face Zannah as that was his rule. He reached out to Zannah and decided it was time to end her. In a final duel, they should determine who was more fit to carry the Sith forward. The two fought fiercely, with Zannah slowly gaining the upper hand. She had grown extremely powerful and was more than a match for Bane. Bane, in a last-ditch attempt to preserve himself, decided to release his essence in a ritual to try and take over Zannah's body. Within Zannah's mind, the two kept fighting for control over her body. Zannah eventually beat Bane. With that, Bane died and Zannah took Darth Cognus as her apprentice. She had proven she was well worthy and the most powerful Sith alive, taking on the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith. The teachings of Darth Bane lived on through her, and she grew more powerful than he had ever been, just like how he had hoped the Sith would turn out to be. So yeah, that's the story of how the Rule of Two came to be, and the story of its creator. The Banite Rule of Two would be looked on as one of the reasons that Palpatine eventually succeeded in overthrowing the Republic. Zannah went on to carry on Bane's legacy. For her backstory before meeting Bane, Zannah was born on the planet Samov Rit. During her childhood, the Jedi arrived on her planet looking for recruits in their fight against Sith. As her cousins were gleeful to join the Jedi, Zannah went along in order to not be left behind, having a lot of potential in the Force herself. On their way to Ruusan, the ship was shot down by the Sith and crash-landed. Zannah and her cousin survived, but were forced to survive on their own on an unknown planet. Zannah befriended a local animal known as a bouncer. Two Jedi, tasked with killing bouncers which were prone to sickness that made them go mad, killed her bouncer as well, as they didn't distinguish whether it was infected or not. In a fit of fury, she killed both Jedi with the dark side. This was the first time she came in contact with her dark side. Soon after, Darth Bane adopted the young girl, and she became his apprentice. The first test Bane set upon her was to find her own way off Ruusan and meet him on Onderon. This should prove she was worthy. Zannah did as asked. On the way to Onderon, she was met with a choice. A wealthy Republic family who took her along offered to take her in. She contemplated taking the easy route and leaving Bane behind, but decided against it, as she deemed the family weak after they shared that their mother had died as a Republic soldier against the Sith. She saw no use in joining a family that couldn't protect their own. With her choice settled, she met with Bane, determined to become a Sith. As Bane's apprentice, she also gained access to Freedon Nad's holocron, which taught a lot about dark side sorcery. Bane himself was unable to use these proficiently, as his connection to the Force was more natural and elemental. But Zannah could and was fascinated with them, absorbing the knowledge of Freedon Nad's. In time, she became very proficient in Sith sorcery. She also soon afterwards completed her double-bladed lightsaber. For Darth Bane, she traveled the galaxy and tried to get different factions to lean up against the Republic to keep it in a weakened state, now that the Sith Brotherhood no longer existed. She also infiltrated the Jedi Temple and even saved Darth Bane from dying when his Orbalisk armor was destroyed in a fight with the Jedi. Her Sith sorcery came in handy time and time again, as she turned people insane if necessary by showing them their greatest fears in the middle of battle. Bane grew impatient with her, as she didn't challenge him, believing it was due to her waiting for him to grow weak and old. But in truth, Zannah was cautious, as she saw her master growing weaker, that it could be a trap. Also, she wanted to have an apprentice ready already before challenging her master in order to be able to continue the Rule of Two. She came across a dark Jedi named Set Hearth, and made him her unwilling apprentice. Upon learning of Bane seeking to replace her with another apprentice and prolonging his own life, she saw that the time was nigh to challenge him. Set Hearth had also escaped with the holocron of Darth Andedu and seek to have life away from the rule of two. In their final fight, Zannah and Bane both activated their lightsabers, well aware that it was their last moment together. Bane's powerful strikes quickly overwhelmed Zannah at first, putting her on the defensive. Zannah knew that her Sith sorcery was an advantage that she had over her master, thus tried to use it and drive Bane insane. But the Dark Lord had a life full of pain, and had already conquered his fears during his lifetime. Desperate for an advantage, Zannah used her sorcery to call upon pure dark side tendrils with the energy of a nearby dark side nexus to attack her master. These tendrils managed to hold Bane back, causing him excruciating pain. But Bane was used to pain, and managed to break free and attack Zannah, who was focused on keeping the tendrils up with her sorcery. Bane knocked Zannah's lightsaber out of her hand and went in for the kill, but one of the tendrils then cut off his arm just before the lightsaber reached Zannah. Bane then grabbed her arm with his other hand and performed the essence transfer ritual. Inside her mind, she managed to defeat Bane and regain control over her body. Although Bane did leave an imprint on Zannah's mind, Zannah then took Darth Cognus as her apprentice and taught her everything just as Bane's rule of two intended. Eventually, she was succeeded by Darth Cognus, who bested her. As a fun fact to end the Zannah segment, our favorite lightsaber-collecting cyborg General Grievous eventually got his hand on Zannah's double-bladed lightsaber and added it to his collection. Darth Cognus was originally just known as the Huntress. She was a female Iktochi, the same species as Saesee Tiin, who lasted 1 second against Sidious during Palpatine's arrest, which is besides the point, I know. She was very strong in the Force and had frequent visions that she learned to control, eventually even able to gain small insights into possible futures. With that and her natural precognition abilities, she became a very successful assassin. That's also how she earned her name as the Huntress. Way into her years as an assassin, she was approached by Princess Sarah, who wanted to capture Darth Bane to figure out what his role was in her father's death. Alongside a team of 20 commandos, she should capture Bane and bring her to Sarah's dungeon. Sarah also gave the Cognus a vial of Synflax, which was a strong neurotoxin to sedate Bane. Although Cognus was unable to see the outcome of her upcoming battle through her visions, she was intrigued to be facing off against the Dark Lord of the Sith. In the following days, Cognus and her team infiltrated Bane's mansion when he was away, and set themselves up inside. Cognus also took Bane's personal holocron, although she didn't know what it was at the time. They set up several sonic detonators and had tangle guns to stun and slow the Dark Lord down. Once in range, she would use the neurotoxin to capture him. Bane, upon returning to his mansion, sensed that something was off. He quickly killed 3 of the assassins with Force Lightning and dodged their stun guns. Cognus was now face-to-face with Bane, having 2 blades that were covered in the neurotoxin. She threw 3 flash grenades at him, blinding him temporarily. That was all she needed, sliding in and cutting his arm with her blade. Bane was now under the effect of the Synflax. Although he still killed several more of the assassins, he eventually succumbed to the effects of the neurotoxins. Cognus had succeeded in capturing a Dark Lord of the Sith and was on the way to Princess Sarah's mansion with her prisoner. In her dungeon, Sarah tortured Bane and tried to get him to confess that he killed her father, unaware that it was Zannah who had done that. Cognus then saw in one of her visions that Bane would be set free soon. Although she knew that she should run now before he was free, she was hit with a feeling she hadn't given proper thought to before. She always felt that her life was meaningless at this point, but something in the Force was telling her that this was about to change. Adding to that Bane had been in her visions for years already, she felt that there was something there. Her vision came through. Bane was freed and fought off Zannah, who at the same time tried to challenge him for the mantle of Dark Lord. Bane fended her off and escaped. As Bane made his way to a ship, Cognus stood before him. To Bane's surprise, Cognus kneeled down and presented Bane's lightsaber and holocron she took, asking to serve him and hunt down Princess Sarah for him in exchange for Sith training. Bane agreed, and together they set off. On board of the ship, she opened up about her Force visions and how they were often accurate. She then tracked down Sarah and killed her. Bane took her with him and gave her the title of Darth, but before he could train her, he had to kill Zannah. Before summoning her for their final confrontation, Bane asked her if he was victorious in her visions, but Cognus replied that it always changed. Sometimes Zannah was victorious, sometimes Bane. With that, Bane called for Zannah to come to their location. While waiting for Zannah to arrive, Bane lectured her on the Rule of Two, how it was the way forward for all Sith. When Zannah arrived, Bane assured her that Cognus was merely a spectator. Cognus quickly added that she was willing to serve whomever was the victor of their duel, only wanting to serve the most powerful Sith. As the two Sith Lords battled before her, Cognus was in awe at their speed, barely being able to follow their attacks with her eyes as they fought across the plain. When Zannah eventually was victorious, Cognus introduced herself and swore her loyalty to the Sith. Zannah then completed her training, and together, they made the Sith stronger. Cognus eventually took on an apprentice called Darth Millenial and defeated Zannah in a duel to the death, carrying the Sith forward. Although Darth Millenial eventually deemed himself to be an unworthy apprentice who didn't want to follow the Rule of Two, Cognus took on a new apprentice to ensure that Bane's legacy would live on. Darth Millenial's story before he came in contact with Cognus isn't really known. He was a three-eyes mutant human and strong in the Force. Cognus eventually took him in as her apprentice and brought him up in the Rule of Two, determined for him to eventually succeed her when the time was right. But as Millenial grew in power and knowledge on the Sith, he started disagreeing with Cognus on a lot of aspects concerning the Rule of Two. He found it nonsensical, and even felt like the way of the Brotherhood of Darkness that Bane had destroyed was the correct way. Cognus and him clashed repeatedly with his philosophical disagreement until eventually Cognus had enough of him and threatened to kill him. Darth Millenial then fled to Dromund Kaas to escape Cognus and created a new order on the principles of the Khan Brotherhood. Although he eventually passed away, his Sith cultists on Dromund Kaas endured for 1,000 years and kept preaching his philosophy. Almost 500 years down the line after Darth Bane created the Rule of Two, in 533 BBY, Darth Gravid was the latest successor in the lineage. The Sith before him had accumulated a vast amount of knowledge, artifacts, and wealth, which he was now the holder of, destined to give it down to the next generation. Darth Gravid had an apprentice, a Twi'lek called Darth Gean. At some point, Darth Gravid came to believe that the Sith's devotion toward the dark side of the Force was their reason to fail, and would be their undoing. He then started to incorporate empathy and altruism into his teachings, something that usually only the Jedi preached. He was slowly going insane, losing his mind in the process. In his insanity, he concluded that the only way forward would be to destroy all the Sith artifacts and holocrons that his predecessors had amassed, and lead the Sith onto a new path set out by his own teachings. With that in mind, he started to destroy several of the artifacts, holocrons, and such in his possession. Darth Gean, upon discovering the frenzy her master was in, intercepted him to stop him from destroying the Sith's knowledge. In their ensuing duel, Gean eventually managed to best Gravid, killing him. But the fight left her crippled. He had torn off her left shoulder and arm, as well as parts of the left side of her face. The actions of Darth Gravid were a huge setback for the Sith. Centuries of knowledge had been lost in an instant, leaving the coming generations to have to, yet again, try to amass the knowledge anew, to try and implement the grand plan. That was the legacy of Darth Gravid. There's actually nothing really else to tell on Darth Gean. She was Gravid's apprentice and stopped him from destroying even more, and even in a crippled state, managed to take on an apprentice and continue the Sith lineage under the Rule of Two. So props to her for that. After the setbacks at the hand of Darth Gravid, eventually down the line came Darth Vectivus. Before becoming a Dark Lord of the Sith, Vectivus was a regular human with a caring family which he loved dearly. Due to his family's influence, he became a well-known, savvy businessman and eventually opened a mining facility inside an asteroid belt. His company mined the asteroid for rare ores, and he set up his headquarters next to the mining facility. Unbeknownst to them, though, the asteroid was steeped in dark side energy, granting him and other Force sensitives in the company weird Force visions. Upon discovering his abilities in the Force, Vectivus kept experimenting on the asteroid with it. Intrigued by his newfound abilities, he sought out into the galaxy to find the Sith. He succeeded and became the apprentice to the then reigning Dark Lord. He was taught in the ways of the Sith and dedicated much of his time to further his knowledge in the dark side and the galaxy's history. It's unknown, but most likely he eventually bested his master and became the sole Dark Lord of the Sith. It's also unknown who his apprentice is, and if he even took one. However, later generations of Sith found his holocron that described his business practices, and a dark side ritual developed by himself to project phantoms of the ritual caster across the galaxy. It was created by searching for some weak-willed individual anywhere in the galaxy and draining them of their force energy, but still keeping this individual alive. This force energy could then be used to create a phantom that could take the shape and form of whatever the caster wanted. But holding the form required a lot of mental strength from the initiator, and usually left them extremely fatigued. Also, if the individual whose force energy the phantom was made of was killed, the phantom would also disappear. Now, doesn't this sound awfully familiar? Luke in The Last Jedi. Only Darth Vectivus didn't die of fatigue. In fact, he died of old age amongst his family and loved ones. For reasons unknown, the later Sith of the Rule of Two didn't know of this ability, and its knowledge was lost until 40 ABY. I even find it questionable if Vectivus was even part of the Rule of Two lineage, but he had to be, considering his Darth title. Darth Guile's lineage came sometime after Darth Vectivus. Nothing is known about him except for one great quote to describe the Sith. He said, "The Sith were minuscule malignant cells that were unable to be detected, yet were able to spread throughout an individual's body and ultimately kill its victims." This describes nicely how the grand plan was coming to fruition, with the Sith staying in the shadows and slowly infecting the Republic. After Darth Guile, sometime down the lineage, came Darth Ramage, a male Twi'lek. He was Force-sensitive, but turned away from the Jedi and joined the Sith, becoming the Dark Lord in due time. He had an apprentice, Darth Tenebrous, and was one of the last to follow in the Rule of Two, as the lineage was soon to end. Little else is known about him except for his contribution by leaving a holocron with his knowledge on combining a healing substance with an ore. He also tried to create a virus to destroy the Jedi's connection to the Force, but him and Tenebrous failed with their plan. Tenebrous eventually killed him and became the new Dark Lord of the Sith. This is speculation, by the way, as Tenebrous's master was a Twi'lek, but it was never confirmed to be Ramage. But it's a popular theory, thus I just went with it. Darth Tenebrous was a Bith known as Rujas Gnome. It was around 150 BBY when he eventually got taken in by the Sith and became an apprentice to Darth Ramage. After failing with their virus to destroy the Jedi's connection to the Force, Tenebrous eventually saw no more use in his master and killed him, as was tradition in the Rule of Two. Unlike many that came before him, Tenebrous sought to understand the dark side of the Force, not as a mystical benevolent being, but rather as an energy source that he could manipulate. Thus, he dedicated more time towards understanding the scientific aspects behind the Force. During his studies of midichlorians and through his calculations, he saw the forthcoming of the Chosen One. He also foresaw the emergence of a pivotal figure, a shadow that would signal the end of the established order and govern eternally. Believing himself to be this shadowy figure, he dedicated his time toward preservation of his own life. That's when he eventually discovered a way to manipulate the midichlorians into maxichlorians, which could hold his Force essence and consciousness. He intended to use his maxichlorians to possess another Force-sensitive being's body until the Chosen One arrived, and then take control of the Chosen One's body, a body said to contain the highest midichlorian count ever conceived. That was his gateway to rule eternally. Just like his predecessors in the Rule of Two lineage, he kept on expanding the Sith's network of informants and agents, trying to gain influence into the highest spheres of power. Under his public persona of Rujas Gnome, he was a starship designer who sold his unique designs only to the highest echelons of power. He thus often got invited to glamorous parties and was rather popular with powerful businessmen and industry leaders. During one of his trips, he came across Car Damask, a banking clan manager who was attuned in the Force. As Tenebrous still needed an apprentice, he saw an opportunity with Damask. Manipulating events, he had Car Damask raise a son with a mother of his choosing, which he intended to possess with his maxichlorians. This boy would be Higo Damask, later known as Darth Plagueis. When Plagueis was still a child, Tenebrous took him from his father in exchange for a rise in the banking clan's ranking. Car happily accepted, and Plagueis was brought in as Tenebrous's new apprentice. However, Tenebrous never saw Plagueis as his true apprentice, rather just as a host body. Thus, he didn't teach Plagueis much, rather having him go on pointless side quests across the galaxy and focus on the study of midichlorians. In secret, and in violation of the Rule of Two, he took in another apprentice called Darth Venamis, whom Plagueis was unaware of. Tenebrous's plan was to possess Plagueis when the time had come, and then continue the Sith grand plan with Venamis as his apprentice. He also dedicated a lot more time into the training of Venamis compared to Plagueis. In 67 BBY, Tenebrous learned of a cortosis deposit on Baldemic. Together with Plagueis, he went to investigate the mine, seeing it as a symbolic journey, as the Rule of Two had started all these years ago with Darth Bane's path down the dark side in the cortosis mines of Apatros. But one of the mining probes they took with them was sabotaged by one of their industry rivals, which ignited the lethane gas that was common in cortosis mines. The walls erupted in fire, forcing the two Sith Lords to flee. Tenebrous was able to contain the explosion with the Force, but was distracted. Plagueis used that chance to collapse the ceiling above his master, killing Tenebrous. Unbeknownst to Plagueis, though, that was just what Tenebrous had been waiting for. His Maxichlorian plan, the sole reason Plagueis was born for, was about to become a reality. Upon entering Plagueis' body, Tenebrous accessed Plagueis' foresight and was in shock. He saw his apprentice dying at the hands of a shadowy figure. Horrified that Plagueis wouldn't survive long enough to see the coming of the Chosen One, his Maxichlorians left Plagueis' body in a panic to try to find a different way out, only to see his already deceased physical body in front of him. He was trapped, forever damned to live out the rest of eternity in this cave, as his consciousness couldn't become one with the Force. He was immortal, but couldn't do anything with it, simply being in essence trapped in a cave. Plagueis' birth was entirely a fabrication of Tenebrous. From birth, he was groomed to be a Sith apprentice by his mother, and his father showed no care toward him. Eventually, Tenebrous took him in at a young age and taught him the basics of the Sith. But as Tenebrous wanted to limit Plagueis' knowledge to possess him easier, Plagueis had to seek out and teach himself most Force abilities and lightsaber skills. Naturally gifted, he was quite skilled and became quite proficient in both. Just like the Sith before him, in order to expand his influence in the galaxy, Plagueis eventually took control of his father's position as the head of Damask Holdings, a powerful financier in allegiance with the banking clan with vast amounts of money and resources. Plagueis, throughout his time under Tenebrous, slowly came to the realization that he didn't feel like the Rule of Two was something that was necessary to bring the Sith forward. He agreed that the power shouldn't be spread amongst several beings, but also felt that the cycle had to end at some point. Plagueis saw himself as the one to end the cycle of the Rule of Two. With him and Tenebrous went to the cortosis mine, it hadn't really crossed Plagueis' mind to actively betray his master yet. But in his master's moment of weakness, he heard the Force call out to him. Acting on it, he collapsed the ceiling on his master, wanting to claim the mantle of Dark Lord for himself, as had all the previous apprentices under the Rule of Two before him. As Tenebrous lay there dying, Plagueis told him that he'd end the Rule of Two, then snapped his master's neck with the Force. When Tenebrous' Maxichlorians entered his body, Plagueis didn't really notice it, except for losing his foresight in the Force, a side effect of the Maxichlorian infection. Plagueis then went on to continue his work on bringing the grand plan to fruition. Just like Tenebrous, he felt that the time had come soon for the Sith to reveal themselves. Upon his return after killing Tenebrous, he was challenged by Darth Venamis, whom he defeated after a duel. Deciding to preserve his body, he kept him alive, intending to use it for experiments. Still, he needed an apprentice. In 65 BBY, he came across a teenager on Naboo, wanting to access the plasma resources of the planet by supporting one of the political candidates to become king. He was intrigued by the young boy's defiance against his father, and also by his immense potential in the Force. He started grooming the boy, positioning himself as a father figure which the boy desperately wanted. This boy was, of course, Sheev Palpatine. Plagueis managed to manipulate Palpatine into building up enough rage to kill his own family. After that act, Plagueis took him in and trained him to become a Sith apprentice, giving him the name Darth Sidious for his insidious nature. Unlike Tenebrous, Plagueis taught Palpatine as much as he could, wanting Palpatine to become his equal. His way of ending the Rule of Two was for the both of them to rule eternally together, him and Palpatine, side by side, the two most powerful beings in the galaxy. With that, they set out to conquer the Republic. Plagueis had Palpatine become a politician to slowly rise in the ranks and eventually become Chancellor of the Republic. Also, he set out the creation of the clone army with the Kaminoans by manipulating Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, intending to use Damask Holdings resources to fund it. The army should be given to the Jedi and then be used to destroy them. That was the Sith's plan. After an assassination attempt that nearly killed him, Plagueis took a back seat from the public and devoted his life toward the study of midichlorians, seeing them as the key for an eternal life, just like Tenebrous. Also, he was forced to wear a respirator to breathe as the assassination attempt had severed parts of his breathing tubes. His research was groundbreaking, as he was able to create and destroy life by manipulating the midichlorians in a being's body. He demonstrated this feat on the body of Darth Venamis by reviving and killing him repeatedly. However, the organs of Venamis eventually failed, leaving Plagueis to solve the biological deterioration for his quest to immortality. The grand plan set up by him and Palpatine eventually resulted in the invasion on Naboo, resulting in Palpatine being elected Chancellor of the Republic. On the night before the election, Plagueis and Palpatine celebrated their victory together, with Plagueis drinking a lot of wine, becoming increasingly drunk from it. As he trusted Palpatine completely, he also gave his guards the night off, considering Palpatine to be protection enough for himself. As Plagueis, for the first time in 50 years, fell asleep, Palpatine, just like Plagueis all these years ago with Tenebrous, exploited his master's moment of weakness. Palpatine's finger erupted with Force lightning, electrocuting the Dark Lord of the Sith that laid there sleeping. Too drunk to fight back, Plagueis' respirator was disabled by Palpatine's attack, making him slowly suffocate. It was a tragedy. Although he had been able to create life by reviving Venamis, he failed to do the same with himself. With that in mind, Darth Plagueis died. Tenebrous' vision had come true. Darth Venamis was also a Bith, and was found by Tenebrous on one of his many travels. Tenebrous saw his potential in the Force and took him in as an apprentice besides Plagueis, seeking to train Venamis to be his true apprentice, as he saw Plagueis as nothing more than a vessel. When Tenebrous died, though, Venamis seeked Plagueis out and confronted him, wanting to take the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith for himself. He was even trained by Tenebrous in Plagueis' preferred lightsaber form in order to combat him better, but still he was beaten by Plagueis. As he kneeled there defeated, he pleaded Plagueis to take him in as an apprentice, but Plagueis instead forced him to inject himself with a coma-inducing substance. He never regained consciousness after that, only being kept alive for Plagueis' experimentation on midichlorians. Before his duel with Plagueis, he had sought out several individuals in the galaxy to potentially become his apprentice, and also kept a list of them. All of these individuals on the list would be killed by Plagueis, though, over time. In general, his claim to the Darth title was illegitimate, but still, he was technically part of the Rule of Two lineage. Sheev Palpatine was born on Naboo to a very wealthy family. However, throughout his childhood, he was at odds with his father, having a terrible relationship with him. He was a natural prodigy, though, interested in power and the Sith teachings, seeking what little there was known about them in the Naboo library. After encountering Plagueis, he finally had someone to talk about his viewpoints with. Plagueis encouraged him to confront his father, which resulted in a fight where his father told Sheev that he hated him. Enraged, Sheev killed his entire family, then seeked out Plagueis to help him cover the murder up. He was trained in the ways of the Sith and was incredibly talented, mastering all lightsaber combat forms quickly as well as several Force techniques. In his political career, he eventually became the Senator of Naboo by having the previous senator assassinated. As a senator, he became rather popular due to his humble nature that didn't make a lot of enemies. With that, his influence kept growing in the Senate. During his apprenticeship under Plagueis, he came across a young Dathomirian Zabrak and took him in as an apprentice, training him in the ways of the Sith. The Zabrak was being groomed to become his apprentice, and he named him Darth Maul. To Plagueis, though, Maul was nothing more than an assassin for the Sith, unaware that Palpatine had given him the Darth title and actively sought him to be his apprentice. As Palpatine and Plagueis kept putting all the chess pieces in place, it culminated with the invasion on Naboo. At that point, the Sith's manipulation had weakened the reigning Chancellor Valorum position drastically, and they had influence into powerful companies, amongst them the Trade Federation, whose leader, Newt Gunray, was planted there by them and followed their every command. As the invasion led to the vote of no confidence in Valorum, Palpatine, due to his popularity, was sworn in. With that, for the first time in almost 1,000 years since Darth Bane created the Rule of Two and Sith Grand Plan, the Sith had infiltrated the highest office of power in the Republic. After killing Plagueis, as Sidious never had the intention of having Plagueis as a co-chancellor, he moved on with the next steps of the Grand Plan, destroying the Jedi Order and the Republic. As Darth Maul died unexpectedly on Naboo, he took a new apprentice in Count Dooku, whom he bestowed with the Sith title of Darth Tyrannus. As he was Chancellor, he had Tyrannus create a separatist movement, gathering planets that were unhappy with the Republic. The Separatists should provoke a war with the Republic that would grant him emergency powers as well as weaken the Republic and the Jedi. This is where the clone army that was commissioned by Palpatine and Plagueis came into play. Having bred for 10 years, it was ready to be deployed now. Igniting the war on Geonosis, the Sith tumbled the galaxy into chaos, playing both sides of the conflict. Throughout the 3-year war, he kept having the Senate grant him more and more power, making him effectively able to single-handedly change Republic laws and legislations without the Senate's approval. At the height of the war, he saw a chance to turn the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker, to the dark side, having groomed him for several years. At the height of the Clone Wars, he had Anakin kill Tyrannus as he saw him as too weak anyway, and prepared to turn him completely by playing on Anakin's fear of his wife Padme dying during childbirth. During a showdown in his office where Sidious was almost killed by the Jedi Master Windu, Anakin came through, saving him and turning fully to the dark side. Palpatine had his prized apprentice at his side now, giving him the name Darth Vader. He had Vader assault the Jedi Temple to kill the Jedi. Then, he initiated Order 66, a program that had been planted into the clone army's head to kill the Jedi they fought alongside for the countless battles in the Clone Wars. The clones did as programmed, killing most Jedi in the galaxy while Vader killed most in the Temple. After that, he went to the Senate and declared the Republic to become a galactic empire, which was met with thunderous applause. Palpatine had succeeded. The grand plan set out by Darth Bane had come to fruition. The Sith had won, and the rule of 2 had proven its effectiveness. The Republic had been infiltrated by the most powerful Sith in history. The knowledge and preparations of 1,000 years of Siths passing down the lineage had culminated in their absolute victory. The Jedi had been all but exterminated and were of no threat to them anymore. The Republic was theirs to rule and cease to exist. Alongside Vader, Palpatine set up the Empire in his design, becoming the Emperor of the galaxy. He ruled through control and a doctrine of fear, believing that fear would keep people from revolting. Under Sidious, a huge military program was launched, pumping out Star Destroyers and the Death Star. But what Sidious's empire failed to suppress was rebellion. Despite their efforts and fear-mongering, people started standing up against his empire, creating the Rebel Alliance. These rebels would eventually come to be his downfall, as with them came also the last hope of the Jedi in the form of Luke Skywalker, the son of Vader. As his empire failed repeatedly to snuff out the rebellion, Palpatine attempted to do so himself at Endor as part of a master plan, while at the same time trying to turn Luke to the dark side. After having disposed of Maul and Tyrannus, he saw Vader as replaceable as well after his injuries at Mustafar. On the second Death Star, Luke was brought before him, and he attempted to turn him to the dark side and take Vader's place as his apprentice. But underestimating Vader's desire to protect the people he loved, he didn't anticipate that Vader would betray him. Seeing Luke suffering at Sidious's hands, Vader eventually picked him up and tossed him down the reactor shaft. With that, Darth Sidious died, and so did the lineage of the Rule of 2. It had culminated in him and ended with his death. Vader was redeemed and turned back to the light. Darth Maul was born in 54 BBY on Dathomir. His mother was a Night Sister of Mother Talzin's coven who wanted to spare him the fate as a Night Brother. One day, Palpatine visited Dathomir to learn more about the dark side. He encountered Maul's mother, who pleaded with him to take Maul with him. Palpatine agreed, as Zabraks tended to be prone to the dark side and strong in the Force. Maul was trained by Palpatine as a Sith assassin, spending most of his time isolated with just a droid to keep him company. His days were entirely made up of training to become a Sith, being suggested to painful punishment should he fail any of his tasks. Maul's trial came when Sidious set him out on a jungle moon, having assassin droids chase him for 1 month. Maul had to survive or die trying. Maul succeeded, battered and exhausted. Sidious was gleeful at his student's advancements and bestowed the Darth title upon him, calling him his Sith apprentice, although it was against the Rule of 2. Sidious intended to use Maul to eventually overthrow his master Plagueis and rule with Maul at his side. During the time up to the invasion of Naboo, Maul was tasked with several assassination missions, be it crime syndicates like the Black Sun or politicians. All serving towers destabilized the Republic and moving Palpatine further up the ladder as a politician. However, when Maul was sent to Naboo to take out Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, he was beaten by Obi-Wan, resulting in his presumed death. Maul had grown arrogant and overconfident, resulting in his downfall. Palpatine moved on from Maul, feeling pity that the apprentice he had groomed for his whole life had wasted his potential away so easily, especially as he had just killed Plagueis at the same time as Maul had been beaten. Palpatine thus searched for a new apprentice to fill Maul's role. Maul, however, survived his injuries from the fight with Obi-Wan through pure hatred and rage, sustaining himself in the dark side through the singular thought to get revenge on Kenobi. For years, as Palpatine and Dooku had already started the Clone Wars, Maul's presence on the garbage world of Lotho Minor was unknown to anyone but Mother Talzin. As Talzin saw use in Maul's reappearance, she had his brother Savage Opress, who trained briefly under Darth Tyrannus, seek him out and bring him back. Savage did as told, bringing Maul, who was a shell of his former self and completely insane, back to Talzin. With the help of Night Sister magic, she erased the insanity in his mind and created new legs for him from fallen battle droids around her. Maul has returned. Determined to get revenge on Kenobi, him and his brother set out to find him. They succeeded, but failed to kill him in their first encounter. Maul then went on to build a crime empire, allying himself with the Mandalorians of Death Watch, as well as several underworld factions like the Hutts, the Pikes, and Black Sun. With their help, he managed to retake Mandalore and was even installed as the de facto ruler. To satisfy his revenge, he killed Kenobi's unofficial girlfriend, the Duchess Satine, in front of Kenobi, who had to watch helplessly. Sidious, who had watched his former apprentice go on his carnage for months, decided that Maul taking the throne of Mandalore was too much power in the hands of him. Sidious personally arrived on Mandalore to put a stop to it. In their ensuing duel, Maul and Savage stood no chance against the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith. Too fluid, too fast was Palpatine's movement. Savage was killed and Maul captured. Palpatine then used Maul to lure out Mother Talzin, letting him escape. Sidious's plan succeeded, and alongside Darth Tyrannus and General Grievous, they killed Mother Talzin, the only being powerful enough to potentially rival Palpatine's coming rule. Maul was powerless to stop any of it. In absolute agony, having lost everything yet again, he escaped back to Mandalore, but was invaded by the Republic soon thereafter. Although he managed to escape the Republic custody, he had nothing left to live for. In the ensuing empire of his former master Sidious, there was no place for him. He had his chance to be Palpatine's apprentice. He could have been there side by side when the grand plan of the Sith succeeded after centuries of planning, but had lost it all when he lost to Kenobi on Naboo. Focusing even more on his hatred and his quest for revenge on his enemies, he dedicated the remaining years of his life to try and gain an advantage on Sidious in any way possible, but failed to find anything proper. Finally, he managed to track down Kenobi on Tatooine, wanting to kill him once and for all. Although his quest for power was a failure, at least he could satisfy his bloodlust by killing his old rival. However, Maul had misread Kenobi's situation completely, expecting the Jedi to be hopeless and in despair after the fall of the Order. What he found instead was an Obi-Wan Kenobi who had risen above him in every sense of the way. In their last fight, Maul was killed after just 3 swings, ending his life of hatred and torment. With his last breaths, he found comfort in the words of Kenobi that the Chosen One would avenge him by defeating Sidious. Count Dooku, who later turned to the Sith, was once a Jedi. Born on Sereno to a noble family with vast amounts of wealth, he was brought to the Jedi Temple as he had great potential in the Force. He passed his Jedi trials with ease and became the Padawan of none other than Grandmaster Yoda, one of the greatest Jedi in his generation. Dooku was extremely gifted, and his connection to the Force was far superior than any of his peers. He frequently trained with Grandmaster Yoda, and his skills with the saber and Form 2 Makashi were said to be second to none, with him even beating Yoda at times in their sparring sessions. Dooku eventually became a Jedi Knight and took his own Padawan in Qui-Gon Jinn. During this time, the Sith's machinations had taken their full effect already. The Republic Senate was filled with corrupt and greedy individuals, the Jedi Order had grown complacent, and the Outer Rim was in turmoil, with crime becoming common occurrences. Dooku saw these developments with worry, becoming increasingly disillusioned with the Jedi teachings, seeing the Republic as an institution that was failing, especially after a failed campaign in Galadron he was involved in. Force visions further amplified his fears, and he saw the necessity of a new order. He shared his concerns openly. Among those agreeing with him was Sifo Dyas, a close friend of his. During one meeting where Dooku was present, he met Ego Damask, Darth Plagueis' alter ego. Plagueis was intrigued to see Dooku seem to disagree with the Jedi Order on several talking points and relayed the information to Palpatine, that Dooku seemed prone to the dark side and could be of advantage to them. Palpatine, senator at the time, in turn started to form a friendship with Dooku. with the two often meeting and Dooku talking about how he saw the Republic as a flawed institution. After his former Padawan Qui-Gon's death on Naboo, Dooku turned his back on the Order, leaving the Jedi and taking his Count title on Serenno. During another meeting with Palpatine, he revealed that he at first wanted to hunt down the second Sith, but then had changed his mind and now seek to ally himself with them, seeing the fault for Qui-Gon's death with the Jedi. Dooku seeked to reform the Republic. To Palpatine, who had been searching for an apprentice after Maul's untimely demise, this was all he needed to hear to be convinced that Dooku would make an excellent apprentice. Dooku, although aged, was still one of the greatest Jedi of his time, well-spoken, charismatic, and could exert influence through his vast wealth. Palpatine accepted him as his apprentice, branding Dooku the title of Darth Tyrannus. As a first act to show his loyalty, Dooku had to kill his friend Sidious, who had recently given the order to create the clone army. Dooku did as told and took control of the cloning project in Sidious' stead. As a Sith apprentice, Dooku started studying their ancient teachings and was instrumental in the execution of the last steps of the Grand Plan. Using his well-spoken manner, he managed to become the leader of the Separatist movement to break away from the Republic. As their head, he led them into the war against the Republic, being the first Sith that openly was at war against the Republic for the first time since the creation of the Rule of Two. Tyrannus always believed that alongside Sidious, he'd rule the galaxy and rid it of corruption. It was almost a noble intent, one could think. Dooku also had two Sith apprentices in Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress, but neither were given the Darth title and were thus ineligible to the Rule of Two. Also, they weren't included into the Grand Plan's designs in any way, rather being used to simply carry out assassinations and other tasks. Both of them eventually were disposed of by the Sith. At the height of the Clone Wars, Sidious asked Tyrannus to help him turn Anakin Skywalker to the dark side. Dooku agreed to help, and on a duel on the Invisible Hand ensued. Skywalker had grown extremely powerful over the years and bested Dooku, cutting off his hands. Although beaten, Dooku expected his master to step in at any point and save him, until he heard these words.
Do it.
Sidious had betrayed him. From the start, Sidious had never intended to have Tyrannus as his permanent apprentice, rather seeking a younger, more powerful apprentice. In Anakin, Sidious had found his prized pupil. Dooku was killed and left a legacy as the Sith that had some of the greatest contributions toward the Grand Plan, but was just used as a puppet by his master and replaced. As the Rule of Two said, only the strongest shall rule. The weak shall perish. If the apprentice was too weak, so shall he. Anakin Skywalker was born on Tatooine. Having no father, his mother gave birth to him through a machination of the Force. Believed to be the chosen one to bring balance to the Force, at the age of 10, he was found by Qui-Gon Jinn and brought to the temple as he recognized his incredible potential in the Force, one that was greater than any being ever to have lived in the galaxy. After Qui-Gon's death on Naboo, his training was carried out by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was a Padawan himself at the time. Anakin quickly proved himself to fulfill his potential, being incredibly powerful and learning faster than any of his peers. However, as he was rather old at the time of his training, he had a lot of imprints and attachments already. One such being his past as a slave and his mother, who was killed by Tusken raiders. After slaughtering all the Tuskens that were responsible for his mother's death, he showed the first sign of being heavily prone to the dark side. He went on to marry Padme Amidala, the senator of Naboo whom he always felt affection for, and kept the marriage a secret as it was forbidden for a Jedi to have any sort of attachments due to these leading to the dark side. During the Clone Wars, he became a war hero, responsible for countless Republic victories. From an early age, and ever since his arrival on Coruscant, he formed a friendship with Senator Palpatine, whom he saw as a father figure and regularly confided in. Throughout the war, he also grew more and more disillusioned with the Jedi, seeing their warrior of peace efforts as a hypocrisy considering the countless wars they had just led in the name of the Republic. The banishment and wrongful treatment of his Padawan Ahsoka further fueled his disillusionment. As a vision of Padme dying during childbirth hit him, he sought for ways to prevent this from happening. Falling on deaf ears from the Jedi, Palpatine took the chance to tell him that the Sith Lord Plagueis had managed to create life with the Force, but he had to be willing to tap into the dark side of the Force, revealing himself as a Sith to him shortly afterwards. Torn, Anakin was confronted with the choice to join him. In a split decision, when Palpatine was confronted by the Jedi Windu, he cut off Windu's hand, sealing his fall to the dark side and pledging his allegiance to Sidious. He was branded the name Darth Vader and went on to kill all Jedi in the temple on Coruscant. At the height of his frenzy, he was stopped by none other than his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi, who left him crippled and beaten to die at the shores of Mustafar. But Anakin survived long enough for Palpatine to find him and encase him in a mechanical suit to keep him alive. Forth on, he was Palpatine's enforcer, serving as the second highest in command. During his time in the Empire, he committed countless atrocities, killing enemies of the Empire to ensure the Sith's rule. Although it had crossed his mind to overthrow his master, as was tradition for the Sith, he never saw a real chance in doing so. The injuries he suffered at Mustafar had weakened him to a point that he might never be able to challenge Palpatine. He took an apprentice in Galen Marek, planning to potentially challenge Palpatine with him, but the plan ended up failing as Marek turned away from him. It wasn't until his son Luke appeared that Vader saw a new chance to topple the Empire. But Luke resisted the dark side, trying to get Vader to do the same. On the second Death Star, as Vader saw Luke, his last connection to Padme, being tortured, something inside him switched. Acting upon it, he picked up his master Sidious and threw him down the reactor shaft, killing him as a final act. Although he succumbed to his injuries shortly after, Vader had ended the Sith's reign. The final student in the lineage of the Rule of Two was the one to end it, not by toppling his master, but by destroying the Sith. Although the rule had already succeeded by allowing the Sith to rule the galaxy in the Republic state, it was toppled after 23 years by its last student. What had culminated in Sidious as the most powerful Sith to have ever lived also ended when Darth Vader defeated him. The coming Sith never followed the Banite Rule of Two to the same degree anymore. Balance seemed to have been restored to the Force.